Chinidu, the son of the village's most revered hunter, had been strolling through the woods, bow and arrow slung over his shoulder, when he heard the voice. It halted him in his tracks, his heart missing a beat. The song was unlike anything he had ever heard before, pure, lyrical, and so lovely it seemed to tug at his very soul. His instincts as a hunter kicked in, and he slipped carefully into the underbrush, careful not to make a sound as he followed the voice. As he came closer, he noticed her. Amora sat alone under the tree, her eyes closed as she sang to herself. Her long hair flowed in waves about her shoulders, her face calm, albeit there was an aura of melancholy about her. Chinidu's breath stopped in his throat. He had never seen anybody like her before. She appeared like a ghost, or possibly a woodland nymph, singing to the trees. He pondered whether she could be genuine. For a long time, he waited there, hiding behind a giant shrub, observing her. He didn't dare move or make a sound, fearful that if she spotted him, she would dissipate like mist in the early light. He didn't know why, but something about her pulled him in, something beyond her voice, something deeper. He felt an urgent desire to know who she was, to understand why a girl with such a beautiful voice was out here in the bush, alone. As the final chords of Amora's song faded into the air, Chinidu stepped back, his pulse pounding. He couldn't go hunting today, not after hearing something so wonderful. He had gone to the forest in quest of wildlife, but it was evident that something much more important had found him. Without a word, he turned and went, strolling peacefully back to his hamlet. When Chinidu got home that evening, his father grimaced at the empty bag hanging over his son's shoulder. "No game today?" his father inquired, regarding him with surprise. Chinidu shook his head, still buried in contemplation. "No, father," he said, but he provided no reason. His mind was elsewhere, recreating the moment when he had first heard Amora's voice. He couldn't stop thinking about her, her voice, her face, her presence. Who was she? Why was she in the wilderness alone? He had so many questions, and the more he thought about it, the more he started to doubt whether she was human. She may be a spirit, he thought. Or maybe a ghost, wandering the woods with her melancholy melodies. That night, when he laid in bed, Chinidu couldn't sleep. His imagination raced with ideas, each one more outrageous than the previous. But one thing was clear: he had to go back. He had to find out who she was, and why she sang with such pain in her voice. He longed to discover the tale behind the girl who had won his heart with a single song. The following morning, Chinidu went out again, this time with a defined objective. He wasn't going hunting. He wasn't even bringing his bow. Instead, he brought a little basket of food and drink, resolved to return to the area where he had seen her. He couldn't ignore the notion that she needed assistance, and he was going to find out why. As he made his way back to the area where Amora had been the day before, his pulse raced quicker with every step. What if she was gone? What if he never saw her again? But as he neared, he heard the faint sound of her voice, wafting through the woods like a songbird. His heart soared. This time, he didn't hide. He moved out into the open, trying to approach her carefully, not wanting to shock her. Amora was seated in the same location, her back against the oak tree, her eyes closed as she sang gently. Chinidu halted a few steps away, his voice barely a whisper. "Excuse me," he murmured, his heart hammering. Amora's eyes sprang wide, shocked. She glanced up, her eyes meeting Chinidu's. For a minute, none of them spoke. Chinidu held his breath, frightened that she might go away. But instead, Amora simply gazed at him, her big eyes filled with surprise and something more. Fear. "I'm sorry," Chinidu responded hastily, pulling back a bit to give her room. "I didn't mean to frighten you. I heard your voice. Yesterday. It was beautiful." Amora's apprehension lessened significantly, but she still appeared wary. "Thank you," she whispered slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I brought you something," Chinidu said, holding out the basket. "I wasn't sure if you had food, or if you needed anything." Amora stared at the basket, then back at Chinidu. She hadn't eaten much in days, and while she was apprehensive of this man, something in his eyes told her he meant no harm. Slowly, she nodded, and Chinedu laid the basket down beside her. I'm Chinedu, he replied, sitting down a little distance away, giving her room. I live in the village nearby. My father is a hunter. I've never seen you before. Are you from here? Amora paused, uncertain of how much to share. She stared at the basket, her tummy grumbling slightly. I'm not from here, she murmured gently. I ran away. Chinedu's heart wrenched at the despair in her words. He wanted to ask why, but he understood that the answer wasn't something she was ready to reveal. Instead, he merely nodded. It's okay, he murmured kindly. You don't have to tell me. But if you need support, I'm here. I can get you food, water, everything you need. Amora gazed at him, her eyes filled with tears. She hadn't felt compassion in so long. For a minute, she didn't know what to say. Thank you, she said, her voice cracking. Chinedu grinned, his heart overflowing with warmth. He didn't know why, but he felt that he had been brought to this time for a purpose. There was something remarkable about Amora, something beyond her voice. He couldn't understand it, but he knew one thing for certain: he was determined to assist her, no matter what. Watch out for episode 3.